Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am Tamara Johnson Shealy. It's Friday, a rainy Friday morning here in Georgia. Thunderstorms, tornado warnings. Good Lord, it was a scary evening. But good morning, good morning, good morning. Let's see where our trusty co-host. I am Tamara Johnson Shealy, and this is our Friday broadcast of Tamara for Georgia. Let's see who is. If they're here, they're here. Let's see where they are. Let's see. Miss Robbie, let's see. I think she's here. Good morning.
I survived the tornado.
I'm still alive.
I'm sorry, y'all. I'm still here. You know who I'm talking
to? We survived, Robbie. Let's see where Mr. David is.
We're still here. There's some upset people out there, Samara. And they are not lovers of truth.
Good morning, David.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. We survived the tornadoes last night, David.
Yeah. I saw the lightning kind of flashing through the window. Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, it's scary.
They have drills. I heard the sirens like 3 a.m. this morning, like, yeah. I just like sat up like, okay, just don't let the roof of my house come off.
I've had a few trees fall. You know, in Southwest Atlanta, we got old tree canopies. And so our trees, when we have a storm, our trees come down, shuts down the whole power grid for a neighborhood. Hey, Doug.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Good morning, y'all. We all survived the tornadoes and the hurricane and the storms.
Y'all check in if you're safe and if your houses are okay.
Yes. Good morning. Good morning. So, David, don't be yawning.
Are we boring you, David?
David, are we boring you?
No. I'm looking at two screens, and I wanted to do some explication of the Green New Deal and some of the ways in which white supremacy has affected climate change in this. So
white supremacy has affected climate change. Now, David, you're gonna get me and Robbie in all kind of trouble. Yeah. We're blaming white supremacy now for climate change.
Yep. I think I can make a very, very cogent case.
Okay, David. So we're gonna let you start out with how white supremacy has affected climate change, because me and Robbie are already in enough hot water with folks.
They're coming, David. They're coming. They're gonna come for you too.
Okay.
Let's just think about something that most of the people who do climate work and work on the green economy and Green New Deal and all of that stuff have and the environmentalists for decades now. We know that this country produces 2.5 times the greenhouse gases per capita than any other industrialized country, any other wealthy country. Now that's a standard. People talk about this all the time, but they really don't drill down into this issue. Why are the statistics so out of whack with Britain or France or Germany or Japan? And I
know. I'm gonna raise my hand like we're in class. I know. I have a thought. Can I share my thought right there where you are, David?
Yeah.
So I went to North Carolina for the Citizen Science Association for their biannual conference, and when I tell you, it was 800 plus scientists from all over this country, all academia, all major institutions. Their scientists were there, David. It was about 60 of us with the environmental justice community, and we were the Black people. So there's such a disproportionate number of Black and brown people engaging in science. And, there's this whole world of academia that they're studying and they're doing research. But what I saw, which was very obvious to me and all of us that were with the environmental justice community, what we saw was that they're not doing enough science. They're doing science for science sake. They know more about the birds, the bees, and the trees.
Theory.
Yes, in theory, they know all of this stuff, but they're not connecting science to the people. That's my thought, David, on where you are.
Can I piggyback?
Yeah.
And to piggyback off, Ms. Tamara, really, it's because the money is in old systems. The people who run the committees you're talking about, they have a stake in the old systems. That's why, Trump is being lobbied for coal and for fossil fuels and so on. To get to the new system, they would have to dismantle the old, and they have a financial gain in that old. The other thing is that they're quite comfortable. They live quite well, so they don't have the industrial in their communities. They don't have the nasty pollution by their kids' park. They don't have, so they don't see the direct effect, to your point when you would bring up MLK. It's all you, David. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah. All right. 2.5 times the greenhouse gas production in this country than in any other industrialized country in the world. You are right that there is a direct connection between this incredible difference and what's going on in the social structure of this country, namely that there is this tremendous divide between the way that Black people and other people of color live and the way that European Americans live. And what I'm saying is that there's a direct connection between the growth of these white suburbs and this incredible difference or exaggeration of the production of greenhouse gases in this country. White suburbs have been connected with a number of things. One of which is the automobile culture, which in this country is the transportation is based on internal combustion engines. All right, and it is not the largest, but it is certainly a major contributing factor to this 2.5 times the rate of greenhouse gas production. And the automobile, that is the internal combustion engine, particularly as a way of transporting people from their homes to their jobs. In other words, commuting is one of the most inefficient ways that you can move people around.
So you're saying, so let's bring it, David. So you're saying that these white suburbs with all their cars are the biggest contributors to the greenhouse gases that's causing.
They're one of them. I mean,
they're one
about
of them.
Yeah, they're about the transportation, the internal combustion engine transportation in this country probably accounts for maybe 1/5 of the greenhouse gases. But it is one of the most inefficient ways of moving people around. 75% of the people who commute in this country by automobile commute in vehicles that weigh 2,500 pounds. And they drive around in them by themselves. They're single occupancy vehicles. All right. So you have this 2,500 pound machine carrying a 150 pound person, right, or a 200 pound person, because we're
so bring it home to white supremacy, David. We're gonna make you bring this thing all the way full circle. So how is it directly related to white supremacy? Because we don't want to lose anybody.
The suburbs, the movement of people within and across the suburbs, the commuting that goes on, even the trips to the trips to buy groceries and things like that. These are all done in single occupancy vehicles, or not all, but considerable amount of them. And that movement is overwhelmingly people who live in the suburbs. All right. Now, if you want to look at the other side of it, that is, what are the costs of doing that? Just go up to North Fulton County and see how congested the traffic is.
And to merge it, it does obviously it's piggybacking off of white flight. So when discriminatory covenants were enforceable, or there were penalties for discriminatory covenants, and really in Georgia we have a really interesting history because our senators come from real estate backgrounds. Senator Johnny Isaacson was an agent. He owned brokerages, and we have legacy families that continued that. So the investment, into the north side, the white flight, the investment into the suburbs, the investment into breaking off of city of Atlanta, creating cities, opposite cities like Sandy Springs, et cetera, who did not want to be part of, created this traffic horrible funnel, which is now 400, which then we had to create solutions, right? Transportation solutions, because they were going all up north with urban sprawl and divesting on the south side, right? So it's really important, the relationship that real estate has, because the real estate sales and the brokerages and what people believe is valuable, right, is also skewed with who lives where and who doesn't. And so when you have that base of real estate taxes, it funds the infrastructure, it funds the education, it brings quality goods and services and businesses. And now we have a disparity between the north and south, lack of infrastructure on the south side. And ironically, we as taxpayers, we all pay for fixing the 400 problem. We pay for the unproductivity of our city. And we pay for now what is the result of divestment in Southwest Atlanta. So we're paying quadruply as a result of not having oversight of the bigger picture.
Well, the other part of this is that the real estate is connected, and I think you're right, Robbie, that there is a small group, maybe 10% of the population, the wealthiest 10%, who benefit from this set of arrangements. For most of us, this is a terrible, terrible cost. And the other thing about it is that there's a book that was written about 10 years ago called White Flight, and it's really about Atlanta. It's a history of the Atlanta suburbs. And
isn't there a rest of that title? Isn't it like White Flight and the Making of Modern Day Conservatism, I believe?
What?
Yeah. Isn't it? Yeah. So it's interesting because it's, go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
Say the name of the book again, Robbie, so people will know what you guys are talking about.
Go ahead, David. Just maybe the full.
Cruz, Kruse. It's called White Flight and the Making of Modern Conservatism.
Modern day conservatism. So he's basically running from the history of white flight and what has happened to conservatives, which is interesting because it's the offspring, I shouldn't say off, but the children of those conservatives that become liberal, that move to places like Southwest Atlanta, and they have a root in this conservative background, which is probably why the way that they do things are a little non-inclusive and skewed. I'll go into that after, David.
The point is that for Atlanta and for many other cities, one of the things that these white suburbs did, besides voting for George Wallace in 1968 and for Ronald Reagan in 1980, and right down to the present, is that their emphasis is on keeping Black people and other people of color out of these suburbs. And one of the ways that they did that was defeating every effort to build a mass transit system in the metro Atlanta area. So Cobb County was a bastion of preventing mass transit. And you have the same thing that happened in the 1950s and 60s in New York City. New York City built the Long Island Expressway. There was a very powerful guy who ran in New York State, who was second only in power to the governor, who made decisions about building highways all over the city that cut up poor neighborhoods and allowed for these white suburbs on Long Island to be able to move around freely by automobile. One of the anecdotes that's really interesting about this, the guy's name was Robert Moses. And when they asked him, why don't you build a light rail? Just take 50 meters in the middle of the Long Island Expressway and run a light rail line down. He vetoed that. And so for decades now, the Long Island Expressway has been nicknamed the world's longest parking lot. because that's the kind of congestion that it has had. And all of those people who moved out to Long Island at that time to work in the defense industry particularly were white. And the Levittowns and all of these other big developments that took place from the 40s to 50s into the 60s were kept Black people out. And the jobs were not accessible to the people of color. So the dynamics that were there were twofold. One of which is the growing debt that folks who are borrowing money to buy houses, single family homes, is so there's a hidden cost, you see, to the preservation of the white suburb. The other aspect of it that I think is important for this energy consumption issue is what I would call white consumerism. And what white consumerism means is that the single family home is the beginnings of the trappings of white identity, of making you from a working class person who lived in the cities and worked in a factory or in an office into a white person. And in the 40s, the GI Bill and then the Federal Housing Act all determined those who was going to be able to go out into the suburbs. But white consumerism means a lot more than that. It also means you need a refrigerator, you need a washing machine, you need, most importantly, you need an automobile to get around. So, and the automobile is not just the car itself; it's the debt you take on to buy an automobile. So there's an added debt. There's the installment plans that people use to buy their refrigerators and washing machines, and all of that created a system of credit cards and credit card debt that ended up with the kind of debt that we have. Consumer debt in this country is huge.
Go back, David. I want you to rewind a little.
Get to you. What I'm trying to get across is that there is both this racial privilege that's involved, but also these hidden costs. And ultimately, the hidden costs ended up in the crisis of 2008, and now in the climate crisis. So these hidden costs have accrued. They've been building up over the decades, and it's real important to see that both of those things are going on. That there is inequality between the white suburbs and people who have been prevented from entering those areas, but there were also hidden costs. That's the most important connection to understand between the way that the system operates, and ultimately what this ends up doing is creating a mass base for climate denial, for climate change denial. So what you're saying, Robbie, about having a stake is we need to get beyond the idea that this is all coming from pressure and lobbying from oil companies. The opposition to climate change. If we do not understand, that there are people who think they have a stake in this old way of life, we can't talk to them. And climate justice is crucial. It's a crucial aspect of what we're dealing with. But if we don't talk to white people about how the suburbs are killing them,
well, David, we're gonna have to. Robbie, go ahead.
I guess from a real estate perspective, I see what you're saying, David. I really do, but I also here's the thing: with single family homes, there's equity in those homes. There's tax deductions in those homes. There's value that's gained in those homes. You're able to borrow against that home. You're able to put your kid through school based on this home that got equity because of where the investment happened on the north side. There was just a comment, so maybe we can definitely get back to that because it's poignant. So it's a real challenge because I get what you're saying, David, and there is a stake, but the people on the north side, they know about the tree. Like, they're always trying to save the trees. They're trying to save the trees, more than saving the people. And I see that because I am invested every day in the commentary in these communities online. I am actively engaged with these folks who literally will be upset that we're not arresting low-level criminals at the DA's office, not understanding the cyclicals, but will be out there championing for the trees. Mm-hmm. So we have to recognize that. And I know I always bring this up about the levels, right? And it's even in the Latin community. Clearly, I'm a light-skinned Latina. So we have our, what we call colorism, and the levels of suffering. And until we recognize this, they're not equitable. The people on the north side of Atlanta, I'm just using this as an example, just like the people in Manhattan, we're not suffering in the same way the people were in the Bronx or Brooklyn or Southwest Atlanta or the South Side. That is just the reality of it. And it's very difficult to form alliances, right? To what you're trying to do, unification, and create like-minded coalitions without acknowledging that. That to me, that's a fact.
I'm not disagreeing with you about that, Robbie.
Yeah,
nothing that you're saying is something that I'm disagreeing with. Okay. All that I'm saying is that if you are going to be able to address people who live in those areas of the metropolitan area, mm-hmm. we have to be able to give them some reasons why they're interested.
I don't disagree, but we do have to acknowledge that the privileges that they had.
Of course, Robbie. We keep on going.
We're not. But I could be wrong, but I don't think you said that. Huh? I think you just talked about levels as if they were equitable levels. Like we're all suffering. We're all in the same boat.
I don't know what I said in what I was saying when I was saying that people are prevented from coming out, that people of color are prevented from going out to the suburbs. They've been defeated by mass, the people in the suburbs have defeated mass transit. I've been talking about environmental climate justice as being one aspect of what we need to do. If we only focus on Flint, Michigan, which has probably half the population is white, by the way, if we only focus on the Flint, Michigans, and we don't understand that there are people who have been who structurally have been embedded into this, fossil fuel, white suburb system, and that it's going to be very hard to figure out a way to crack that investment.
So the whole scenario is challenging.
Then we're losing tens of millions of people who are potentially on our side because the system is actually killing them. All right.
It's killing everybody though. They're comfortable while we're all dying. let's just make that clear.
They're comfortable with this destruction. Like they don't want to give up their white privilege, as David always says.
When I mean comfortable, I mean that their infrastructure is.
No one has given them a choice. Okay, the left does not present you people like you and me. Who are on the left, who are progressives, who are trying to organize, have a hidden level of denial, and the denial is that there are no costs to white privilege. All right.
I don't think that's true.
Focus on these so-called benefits. You are in a state of denial, just as much as the people who are denying that the climate is changing. That the climate is in crisis.
I say this very respectfully. This might be projection. I'm going to give an example. Right now, there's a petition because I see all these organizations coming to Southwest Atlanta, and there's no doubt that there's benefits to homeownership. And when Black people, were restricted, hold on, David, when Black people were restricted, right, by the law from homeownership, they could not use the equity in their homes to put their kids through college. They could not use the credit that they had to give their children a gift to buy a home at 20 years old in Southwest Atlanta, which I see all the time. So to add to that, in current existing situations today, I see multiple organizations. For example, I received a request to sign this bike petition. let me be real clear. We don't have the proper infrastructure for here, in my opinion, for people to be safe on bikes. But we have a lot of organizations now because we had a lot of descendants of the folks who took off to the north side are using their parents' credit and equity and so on to buy homes here because they're getting assistance. It's a legacy to some degree. And now they've started these coalitions. They want to bike to work and our streets are horrible. So what they'll do, which I see as kind of a dishonest tactic, is place people of color and say, we got in front, right? In these pivotal positions in these organizations and say, we got to fix our streets, but for who? And let me explain, because who is exiting? Let's be real clear about that. And the second component is, when the tours through Southwest Atlanta began, they did not start on buses. They started on bikes. There's a gentleman out of Adair Park, and I have photographs of it, would do tours of SWATs, and he would bring all his friends with all the money on tours of SWATs, and they have bought up all the assets here. And it created a predatory housing situation. So to your point, David, the 2008, the consequences of that, let's be real about that. When we have a bubble, which we've had 3 over here, those people make money anyway. They buy low and sell high. They buy low and hold them. They buy low and flip them when the time comes. They make money all the time. You know who doesn't? The poor Black people living here. Period. That's my opinion, and that's my opinion.
That's your opinion. Let's talk about home mortgage deductions. All right. That's one of the things.
I don't want to talk about homo. No, kidding. Go ahead.
And we were talking about white supremacy and the Green New Deal, David. We got to bring it full circle. We got about 3 more minutes on this topic because we got some other things we want to kind of shine in on. Bring it full circle, David. 2/3
of the people who own their own homes do not itemize their taxes. That means that 2/3 of the people who are entitled to home mortgage deductions do not get them. Do not think.
How many people in Buckhead do you think don't itemize their taxes, David?
We're not going to talk about itemization on taxes. We're going to talk about this Green New Deal and white supremacy, David. David and Robbie. I'm going to put them both in timeout. They can't even hear that they are like silent. Look at David still talking, y'all. Sometimes we do kind of get into it, y'all. Look at David. All right, he's calm now. Let me bring him back.
Talking about home mortgage
David.
as a privilege.
He's still talking.
And I'm saying that
David,
including most whites, do not take the home mortgage deduction because they don't.
David in timeout. He's a cool off. David is all over the place.
He gets so rattled. I do see this point though about the mortgage deduction. The thing is, I can assure you that the majority of people in Buckhead.
We're not going to talk about mortgage deduction, Robbie. We were talking about white supremacy and the Green New Deal, and you both went off the rail.
Well, I think he has a point. I think, where is he? I do think he has a point.
Can I bring David back?
Please.
Because he's looking like.
He's talking?
Yeah, he's salty with us. David.
There were a lot of comments on the.
David.
Look, I made a very clear connection between why these issues about finances and everything else have a hidden cost, and that's what I'm trying to get across is that things like those kind of tax deductions do not apply to most.
David, are you still talking about tax deductions? We were talking about the white supremacy and the Green New Deal. Let's stop. We're gonna stop. We're gonna bring in Mr. Egberto Willies, who's gonna give us a national political update. Egberto.
Man, Tamara, you guys have been getting rough in there, man. I mean, you guys have been rough and tumble in there with mortgage deductions and Green New Deal and white supremacy. That is the whole reason behind the Green New Deal, to get rid of that. I love what they're doing. I love what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is doing. If you notice, one of the major components of the Green New Deal is to make sure that it's equitably, that as we move to a green economy, it is equitably distributed. So you guys are right on as usual.
David, you're right on. David, you're right on. Did you hear him?
Anyhow, do I get a chance to give my national take here for a second, or
absolutely? We need a timeout.
Okay, timeout on David, timeout on la hermosa Robbie Caban, and of course Tamara. Mira lo que vamos a hacer está bien. Anyhow, about the Mueller report. Let me tell you guys, it was a big. If you looked at the news media and how it was taken, it was a huge bunch of nothing. Everybody was excited to read everything that we have already seen in the New York Post, the Washington Post, Washington Time. I'm going to say this, and some of you might not like it, but it's yet another distraction. It is yet another distraction. And what is it a distraction for, in my humble opinion? What Robbie's been trying to talk about, what Tamara has been trying to talk about, what David's been trying to talk about, those are the real issues. Those are the real issues. So anyhow, I don't want Mr. Trump to be impeached, in my humble opinion. I want him to stay there. I want Democrats to use the Mueller report instead of as a hammer, as a scalpel for every single one of the policies that we want to put out there. And I'm hoping that as we go forward, we learn how to do that. Everything that he has done in that Mueller report and all the shenanigans that he's done has mostly affected, guess who? The people who voted for him, the people who supported him. So I think we have a lot to work with.
I agree with you, Egberto. I mean, and I like that you're basically saying we should be strategic.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we have to be careful because right now everybody is concentrating on the Mueller report in the news media, right? And Robbie, you are out there in the fields with the homeowners, and you know what has happened with redlining and all these issues. None of this matters to those people. To those people out there. So as I wrote in a blog last night.
Wait, can you define those people? Those people, Trump supporters. Those people looking into who are those people?
Well, I tell you what, I'd like to expand who those people are. Those people are the Trump voters that should really be our voters, and those people are our voters. What I try to tell folks now is that let's stop looking down at those Trumpsters. I am trying to meet these Trumpsters because the truth of the matter is they've been hoodwinked. And what we have to try to do is show them the kind of compassion that is necessary to show that we can actually do something for them. The Mueller report and all these elitist progressive people that they're ringing the bell now. I love Rachel Maddow. I love all these progressives, but they're just elitist progressives. You will see none of them in those neighborhoods that you're in, Ravi. You will see none of them doing all the things that really affect our people.
Yeah.
Okay, they talk a good game on TV. Look at what those Republicans are doing to those lowly Latinos, those lowly black folk or whatever. But see how many of them are really in the community, or how many of them are when we are out there in the streets, on the field, other than having a camera. How many of them are really out there pushing the values? If more of them were there, we wouldn't have been in the state that we're in right now.
Yeah, it's an intellectual understanding and theory instead of the actual living it. And Samara, you probably can attest to this within even the Democratic Party. No? Isn't there some parallels to what, I could be mistaken. I hear them. I feel like I do. Tell
me what you hear. Because I'm trying to follow Egberto. I haven't, I don't know a whole lot about this Mueller report, so I haven't been following it to the extent that I could.
In a sense, basically, it's this huge, and Egberto can speak to it better than I, but it's this huge, they've got their teeth in something, and they're like, he's using an example, you should feel horrible, what's happening to these people, the way you see Occupy Democrats, like, look at this terrible thing against Black people, against Black people, but then look what happens to you. Here you are, a Democrat running twice in a seat, and a white woman is placed above you, even though you did all the work. So you're used as a front to some degree to gain. That's how I see it. I could be mistaken.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I'm glad that Tamara said that she wasn't up to what's going on with the Mueller report, because she just made an important statement of where America is, right? Most Americans are not there with the Mueller report. I'm a political junkie, so I know about it. All those folks on MSNBC, CNN, they're political junkies. They know about it. When you guys are out there in the field, you're doing something that really has impacts on people's lives. This Mueller report to a lot of people. Yes, yes, Trump is corrupt. But guess what? Ravi? They think that, okay, Trump is corrupt, but whoever is in that office, they also think is corrupt. So to them, it's not a big leap that this big report comes out and says, oh, look at all the things Trump did. Do you know what most Americans who follow that think? Well, all of them do it, but Trump just got caught.
Well, it's interesting because Tamara and David, of course, is local too, but we were chatting earlier that there's a new, and I'm going to send it to you, there's a new article on investigations in Georgia. The feds have come to Georgia to occupy 25,000 square feet to investigate. And it just came out in the last 11 hours. And it's a discussion on the state and the airport and the city and corruption and so on. And a lot of people, you know, Kasim Reed had a working relationship with Governor Nathan Deal. In fact, there were a lot of photo ops where it appeared he was almost a mentor. Deal was a mentor to Reed. And when you look at Deal's history, apparently Deal has some questionable, to your point. I believe his daughter got a job at the Department of Agriculture, which some people said this was inappropriate, you know, right during, while he was in charge or right after. And what you see is if interpreting this is correct, Deal was a mentor, Governor Deal was a mentor to Reed. All Reed has done is follow in his mentor's footsteps. So you have to wonder why the state now is, this is strange. Like we were talking about this from an outsider perspective. If you're doing that, why are you so mad that City of Atlanta elects are behaving in the same way that you have behaved for decades?
Robbie, sorry, go ahead.
Deal's corruption charges and suggestions of corruption go back to when he was a congressman, not just while he was the governor. So I mean, look, I think that Egberto's talk about this being a distraction. I've been watching MSNBC for 2-3 years now. And the fixation on the Mueller report and the idea that it was going to save us, was going to break the Trump administration, has proved to be, totally false. But on the other hand, the idea that and so much of the time of MSNBC's main, lineup, Chris Hayes and Rachel Maddow and Lawrence O'Donnell, from 8 o'clock in the morning from 8 o'clock in the evening until 11 at night, has been focused on this, that they have never brought up all of the issues about all of the mass organizing that's been going on across the country in the last 2.5 or 3 years. We have really, there's no record in MSNBC of how this tremendous shift took place in 2018 in the electorate. We have no idea. We have no inspiration even for how that took place. Chris Hayes does some of this. I mean, he goes out on these town halls and he brings people in from Ferguson, Missouri. Remember, he did a whole thing on race. So he's done that to some extent, but it's looking for these saviors, looking for this thing. And
David, I am so glad, David, that you hit that on the nail about what with Hayes sometimes comes out, but this great movement that occurred in 2018, we were out there in the field. I can tell you that because I was a part of it with all the great folks from Indivisible, all the great folks from Swing Left, all the great folks from PSR. All these organizers were out there, and you would not have known that it got covered. Here's the funny thing, though. If it were the Tea Party out there in groups of 5 or 10, you can almost feel guaranteed that MSNBC would have carried it, but they don't carry us. And I want to say one short thing before I quit here, and that is, it comes from that thing that I call the rail effect, the left rail and the right rail. We have the MSNBCs looking at the left rail, and we have the Fox and all the others looking at the right rail. They all stay within a particular window. But guess one thing we know is that those two rails make up a track, and that track is going in the same direction, and it's going away from the middle class, and it's going away from the poor. And until we derail it, and that is what I hope we're all doing, until we derail it, then, whoop, I heard a bell.
Yeah.
No, that
wasn't your bell. We don't have a bell for people, Egberto.
I thought you were telling me to shut up.
No, and as far as the Mueller report, I'm gonna just tell you, like, it is a distraction, and many of us are like, to hell with that. Like, okay, what's going to change? Nothing's going to change. We still have work to do, and some of us have not. I haven't even I hear people talk about it, but I haven't even had like a drop of interest to find out what it said. For what? Nothing's going to change. We still have work to do.
Tamara, I thank you, and I am glad that you have the courage to actually say that, because that is how most people feel. And there are I think folks like myself should be using that Mueller report tactically. But at the same token, from my show yesterday, I said, forget about it. Forget about impeachment. Let's start talking about what we are going to do, what you guys are doing to effectively make a change systemically in each of these communities. And if we get that done, the people that we want elected, I'm not talking about just your basic Democrats. I'm talking about progressives getting elected. And I don't care what they call themselves, progressives getting elected.
Okay, as we're chatting, there was a tweet that Kasim Reed liked, and it's interesting. It's a gentleman named Sean Richardson. It says, had a great time getting to know the startups at 33 #ATDC showcase. Their current portfolio and graduates have raised more than $495 million. Atlanta's startup ecosystem is one of the best in the world for local connectedness. #Atlanta is now. When I look at the photos, 90% of the people in the photos are there's no people of color in these photos. And in
Atlanta.
Yeah, well, in Atlanta. And what I know that there's a disconnect, to your point, about what is happening in theory, or what is happening in certain communities, whether it's the North Side. I have, because I'm working in real estate, there's a corner lot here, an entire corner. It's a 6-unit, 7,000 square foot building with parking. I have had the worst time selling this. Why? Because our local values are so unstable. The things that happen on the South Side do not happen on the North Side. Wholesaling, when people buy well below market and are literally stealing from people, that does not happen on the North Side. So I just wanted to mention that, because this is a pure example of the disconnectedness. These folks getting help and all this money, why do we have tons of empty buildings in between our residential homes?
Yeah, well, let's let Egberto give us a final word on his way out. I know he's in San Antonio, boots on the ground, making it happen. So thank you, Egberto, for hopping in, and thank you for all you do.
Well, let me tell you, I just love being on the show, because I tell you what, you guys are accomplishing something. I take snippets of I take snippets of the show and the kind of reactions I get, not just what you see on Facebook, but the comments that they talk about, the intelligent commentary, and we need more of this on these networks is very important. So I got a little window here that I could come in here, and I said, I wanted to do this and also tell you, thank you guys for what you're doing. This is so necessary. Keep the conversation up, and c'est la vie.
Thank you, Egberto. See you next week. Have a safe
good
trip,
one, guys.
All right.
Sure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm seeing these comments here, and there's a lot of them from, good morning from Dwayne to just a lot of comments. Doug Price is on here talking about a book that he recommended, the one that you referenced. And Dave is also asking about why Gwinnett voted no on mass transit. And he's asking,
we know why. We know why, Dave. We know why, Dave. Too many Black and brown people from all over Metro Atlanta will be coming into Gwinnett County, and that is the fear. I live in Gwinnett County, and that is truly the fear.
He's asking examples of what is the new term, quote, white consumerism. I don't know. Was that David?
That was David.
Okay. That's you, David. What is it? What examples of how is the new term, quote, white conservatism?
Consumerism.
Consumerism.
Apologies. Consumerism. Yes. So he wants examples.
That's a term that I that's not something that anybody has
Can you give some examples? Denise is asking.
I've been giving you examples.
Okay.
I mean, it's the whole dynamic that has happened since the 1940s, and that's created this condition in which all of these things that should be rights are turned into racial privileges. So, the access to anybody should be able to get access to a home, but in the suburbs, in the 1940s and the 1950s, Black people were not allowed into the suburbs, and the partnership between the federal government and the big business developers, the real estate developers and the banks, was crucial to that, to creating the white suburbs. This was not done by white people. This was done by the ruling elite. And
who are the ruling elite?
I just said the big developers.
So what are those big developers? Are they people of color?
Well, no, of course not, Robin. I mean, but they're not doing this as a favor to working class whites.
I'm not suggesting they are.
To maintain social control.
I'm not. What I see here is another comment, and I believe it's a real estate comment, so I want to take it from Dave. More than ever, people of color own homes on the South Side, and that is he's true. He's accurate. There was more people moving here, and there's a decent amount of people of color who are able to purchase. But I really want to make a distinction and bring up a side note that, sorry, we're getting all kinds of notices and I'm trying to answer folks on the show, but there's a distinction because the people who are leaving are all poor and they're predominantly Black. So even when people of color buy, and I'm not suggesting that that's a bad thing, there's still a displacement of a demographic that is predominantly poor and predominantly Black. So there's a hierarchy there, even in the Black community. And I also want to mention, because I think it's an interesting point to what you were mentioning, David, on white flight. It's interesting because when even Black people left to Buckhead, right? I mean, that's true if they were able to, but that was almost an act of defiance. So just to know the history, when we look at why people left the hood, well, if you're told you can't do something, you can't buy over here, you can't date this type of person, you can't walk into this. What does that do in terms of human nature? I will do that. And a lot of times we don't contemplate that. We just think that the neighborhoods were deserted without full context. So I just wanted to mention that. Well,
I think that one of the things that is really missing from our conversation is the factor, the crucial factor of all that's going on, is that there is both a race and a class component to what is happening. The dynamics between race and class. And Robbie, please do not interpret what I'm saying as being that I'm eliminating race from the discussion. It is the interplay of race and class in this country that determines how the ruling elite is able to maintain power, right? That's the thing that I've been trying to get across. If you do not talk to white people about their class interests, they will default to their race interests. And we are faced with a choice in this country, literally a choice between race war and class war.
I don't disagree.
If we do not present to European Americans and people of color that they have class interests in common with each other, we're going to end up with a race war. This is the bullhorn that Trump has been trumpeting for the last 3 years, and it has proved to be extremely successful. So if you're and this is one of the reasons, for example, to Egberto's point, why the Mueller report is such a distraction.
But can I jump in right there? You say the race war versus the class war, and I do believe, David, that I think white people are going to protect their class. And I think it's all and that means that I think that means that they're going to protect their race. So they're protecting their neighborhoods.
What they see is their way of life, their community. Huh?
Say again?
Tamara, listen to what you're saying. You started out by saying they're going to protect their class, and then you switched over to they're going to protect their race.
No. What I'm saying is that they will protect their way of life, which is there is no separation once they protect their class. Like they're going to make sure that their neighborhoods are okay, their schools are okay, but that's still protecting their race because these are white neighborhoods and these are white schools. Jump in.
I'm just taking that what you just said as a case study in how confused we are about the distinction between race and class and how they interplay, how they interact with one another. All right. I'm just gonna say that.
Go ahead.
You've been shifting back and forth.
Because I don't know how to separate when it comes to white people. How do you separate the two? How do you separate?
That's the $64,000 question.
Yeah.
How do you present to them a distinction between class and race interests? All right. That's what we need to get across. That when you're looking at costs, when you're looking at these invisible hidden costs, most people of color can see how much this whole system is costing.
Oh, because it costs us, David. It costs me to be black.
No, most working people, most people of color who are working people can see how self-defeating the white supremacy is to people like those who sympathize with, even if they don't necessarily vote for Trump, who sympathize with Trumpism. They can see it. They can see how people are being played for fools.
Not the people who are being, given positions of leader.
Just let me finish. All right. Sure. This country, for the last 3 or 4 years, the life expectancy in the United States has been declining. This is extraordinary. This is world historical. The life expectancy in the United States has been declining. And most of the reason for the decline is white working class people who are succumbing to what are called, the illnesses of despair. All right. That's who is being affected, not entirely, but at least half by the opioid crisis, by obesity, by suicide, which is mostly gun suicide. So when you begin to add all of these things together, you have to see that these folks are being played for fools. And if we don't try to reach them with some coherent and cogent argument, which has to do with their class, as opposed to their apparent race interests, if we don't reach them on that basis, we lose them.
So let me ask a question. So you say if we don't reach them based on class, if we don't. So when we talk about class, are we talking about poor white people, or are we talking about middle class white people? Because
that is the big question. I think we don't really have a full answer to.
Well,
where do we say the working class? Where do we say the working class ends and the middle class begins? 90% of the people in this country since the 1940s have identified themselves as middle class. That's nonsense. That's a fake out. That's
but they're comfortable with whatever it is they believe. So I don't know how that works.
Well, see,
there's about who we mean by they. All right. If we're talking about, I have been presenting to you the suggestion that there is a 9.9% that's under the 0.1% that actually benefits, has a class interest in protecting the system the way it is, including all of the white supremacy and everything else that we have been targeting and pinpointing. However, those people are also the people, that 9.9% is also the people who run the Democratic Party. They don't just run the Republican Party, they run the Democrats as well. They're the ones who finance the Democratic Party. They're the ones who run for office. They're the ones who are the delegates, and all of the other. They're the ones also who are the what do you call it? The campaign advisors, and all of that stuff. So we're talking about right now. What we're talking about is an argument between the 9.9% who are Republicans and the 9.9% who are Democrats. We have to get to the 90%, and those 90% are still being influenced by even the progressives in the Democratic Party to not deal with the class issues. And every time Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders or any of the other so-called progressives, not so-called, they are progressives, talk about the 1%, and they don't focus on class, they are erasing class from the conversation.
And I agree. And I'm going to say I agree with you, David. We don't talk enough about the class structure, but I think there is. I don't even know how to get around that other than continue to do what we're doing here on this broadcast. I know today was a bit confusing. We started out talking about white supremacy and the New Deal. We were supposed to talk about calling our legislators to the carpet. There's a petition that's out with David Ralston to resign. Because of his dealings with, he says he has spent nearly 10 years delaying criminal trials for his accused clients in cases involving violent felonies, sexual crimes, including child molestation, domestic abuse, and more. It's time for Georgia citizens to stand up and tell him enough is enough. He needs to resign his leadership position and his legislative seat now. So there's a petition out to get rid of House Speaker David Ralston. That was where we were supposed to go today. We should have had a guest. He wasn't able to join us, but hopefully we will continue to have this conversation. David and Robbie, y'all, we were on fire today. We have about 2 more minutes left in this broadcast. I'm gonna give you your time, Robbie, because you've been boiling over there.
No, I'm fine. Actually, these conversations are very healthy. And I think it's good because people are shy away from them, but they're very healthy regardless if we disagree. Now, I will say there's an important comment. I'm going to read it, but really quick on the examples you gave, David, in terms of, I agree with you. Class is super important. We should focus on it. I completely agree. But we do have hierarchies and different levels, even among race and in class. And when you reference the examples, the opioid crisis, despair, meaning suicide, and guns, when we had crack in Black communities, when we had gunfire in Black communities, when we had despair as a result, they were not addressed the same, but now they're addressed. So we have those hierarchies, and it's hard to create the alliance, and I'm not saying that you're not. It's just easier when we distinguish that from jump, right? So this comment on here, I think, is really poignant. It says, these are very unsettling times. I don't see how we are going to get through this without another civil war or even a World War III. Tamara for Georgia. Oh, here it is. There are a lot of white people such as myself who will never, in caps, be on the side of the white race or any group of white supremacists when it comes to racial inequality or even a race war. This is from Ruth Wilson. I am for equality and accept that this involves me giving up my white privilege, which I am willing to do in the interest of equality. I would never fight for inequality or white supremacy. I thank you, Ruth, for commenting. Thank you, everyone, for commenting. That says it all. People are willing, you're right, David, to engage in a certain way. But let's engage where we acknowledge everyone's level so everyone can feel included. Yeah,
I agree with you about that. And Ruth Wilson is Mary Wall says, "Happy Passover, happy Passover." Good Pesach to you too, Mary. If we break down the opioid crisis today, and you are absolutely right, Robbie. There is so much sympathy for people who are in the opioid, and in the 1990s when the crack epidemic hit the Black communities, what there was punishment, right? There was criminalization. It was a criminalization of the. But one of the things that I would argue is that even in the 1980s and maybe even into the 1970s, there was an understanding among the medical profession that addiction was a medical problem that could not be could not be solved by criminalization. In other words, by
right. Yeah.
So we've known that. We've known that.
And nothing was done because of who it was happening to.
Please let me finish the point.
Sure,
all right? Just let me finish the point. The point is that by creating this structure of criminal punishment for a medical problem, what we've done is we've eliminated the infrastructure. We've prevented the growth of an infrastructure that could address the opioid crisis. All right, that's what I'm saying. Actually, the white supremacy, the fact that white working people said, this is crack, this is not my problem, this has nothing to do with me, go get them, law enforcement, created the seeds of their own destruction. That's all that I'm trying to say here.
And on that note, we are at the very top of the hour. I want to thank everybody for tuning in for this week's broadcast of Tamara for Georgia. And he was right. Y'all was lit today. That's what he said. Y'all was lit today, and we were. So I just want to thank you guys for joining us every Friday right here at 11 a.m. right here with my co-host, Mr. David Slavin, Miss Robbie L. Caban. You can find them both. You can find Alberto at politicsdoneright.com. You can find David at Acknowledge the Divide right here on Facebook. And you can find Miss Robbie at the NPU Public Resident Forum. And again, I am Tamara Johnson-Sheely. Our website is tamaraforgeorgia.com. Y'all, Tiger Woods won the Masters, and that's how we're going to end our broadcast. Like the winners that we like we are. Have a great week. We'll see you back here next Friday.
Take care, everybody.